President of the African Development Bank, Your Excellency Dr. Monique Nsazabagana, Deputy Chairperson of African Union, Your Excellencies, AU Commissioners, Head of Organs, Regional Economic Communities and Regional Mechanisms, distinguished guests, all protocols observed. I now invite His Excellency Chairperson of African Union to call the meeting to order. I thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam. I now give the floor to the Head of Protocol to tell us about the program.
Excellencies, very good morning to you. May we all kindly rise for the anthem of African Union. This will be followed by the Kenyan, by the national anthem of the Republic of Kenya. Your Excellency, Mr. Ghazali Osmani, President of the Union of Comoros and the Chairperson of the African Union. Your Excellency, Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya. Excellencies, Heads of State, Government of African Union Member States, here present. Your Excellency, Mr. Musa Faki Mohammed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Your Excellency, Madame Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. Excellencies, Honorable Ministers here present. Your Excellency, Dr. Monique Nsazabagana, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Excellencies, Commissioners of the African Union Commission, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, members of the Permanent Representative Committee here present, Excellencies, Heads of African Union organs and Heads of Regional Economic Communities, all protocol observed, distinguished delegates, a very good morning to you all. It's a beautiful day here in Nairobi, the vibrant green city in the sun, where African Union meetings have been ongoing since the 13th of July 2023. It is my utmost honor and pleasure to take you through the program of the opening ceremony of the 5th mid-year coordination meeting of the African Union, regional economic communities and regional mechanisms, which is being held today, the 16th of July, 2023, at the United Nations complex in the very beautiful Republic of Kenya. Following the 43rd Ordinary Session of the Executive Council, which took place from the 13th to the 14th of July 2023 here in Nairobi, today's mid-year coordination meeting is being convened under the African Union theme of the year, Acceleration of African Continental Free Trade Area Implementation, as the African Union continues to pursue its continental aspiration as embedded in Agenda 2063. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the program for today stands as follows. We will have a statement by His Excellency Mr. Musa Faki Mohammed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, followed by a statement by Her Excellency Madame Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. We shall then have a statement by His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, following which we will have the opening statement by His Excellency Mr. Ghazali Osmani, President of the Union of Comoros and the Chairperson of the African Union. Immediately after the opening ceremony, we shall have the official family photo of the session. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to highlight, among others, this coordination meeting has the important task of fast-tracking the integration process in Africa and to consider the report on African Union institutional reform. It is also expected to report and matrix on the division of labor between the African Union, regional economic communities and member states on different sectors. Excellencies, it is now time to begin our proceedings, and without any further ado, I wish to humbly request His Excellency Mr. Musa Faki Mohammed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, to deliver his statement. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Microphone of the chairperson.
Union. Your Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Excellencies Head of State and Government, Excellency Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, my sister Amina Mohammed, Excellencies, Chief Executives of Regional Economic Communities and Regional Mechanisms, Excellency Mahamadou Issoufou, AU Champion of the African Continental Free Trade Area, Honorable Ministers, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Commissioners, Dr. Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, Professor Orama, President of the Afrexim Bank, Chief Executive of ODA-NEPAD, Mr. Secretary General of FCFTA, Mr. Director General of Africa CDC, Excellencies, Ambassadors, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to express my warm greetings and my sincere thanks for His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, his government, and the brotherly people of Kenya for their warm welcome, including the excellent conditions offered to us, which are all a hallmark of Kenya's legendary hospitality. Asanteni sana.
Thank you so much.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Launched in July 2019 in Niamey, Niger, the coordination meeting is convening its 5th ordinary session today, and it affords us the opportunity of assessing what we have done so far and to welcome the progress that we have made, and also to identify further the various, in a positive way, the obstacles that we need to remove from our path. We need to assess the integration with different national economies and beyond, and Africa under the grasp of the various prism of the international scene. In fact, you will see on the agenda the different items that are to be considered: the national integration, the work to be done at the level of the regional economic communities, and despite the particularly unstable economic environment. The report on the regional integration gives us what has been done in 2022. The achievements that are there are very diverse, varied, and they correspond to the actions and projects that have been carried out by the regional economic communities in conformity with their priorities. The presentation of the report will go into the details of the regional integration and supplemented by the contributions of the regional economic communities and other actors involved in the integration process. This process, as described in the report, in fact, has been supported by the speeding up of the implementation of the African continental free trade area. The liberation of trade, the various competition, the legal instruments, and also the flow of investment and the creation of wealth. There is no doubt that in the presentation of his report, the champion of the AFCFTA will be dealing with these issues, particularly e-commerce, the contribution of women and youth to trade, the trade facilitation projects and actions in general. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, such progress cannot hide the constraints, the structural constraints that have always impeded our march. I want to point out the difficulties of financing for the implementation of the infrastructure program at the continental level. The deterioration, microphone of the chairperson, microphone of the chairperson, microphone of the chairperson. As those who are in charge of progress and fighting against terrorism and violent extremism. In fact, the protocol on the free movement of persons and goods cannot be forgotten in this march. In this regard, I reiterate my urging the leaders of the regional economic communities to, and those that have not yet done so, to ratify the protocol. We need to get out of this flagrant contradiction that is to have AFCFTA and also not to have the freedom of movement and goods. The African Union and the regional economic communities are already engaged in this cooperation, in this dynamics of cooperation with the entry into force of the revised protocol, and we should accelerate the pace in order to make it more operational and concrete. Then the regional economic communities between them, by pooling the various means of designing and execution of the development projects that will enable them to have a productivity scale. In fact, the dynamics cooperation between the REX will have to be extended between them and also the AFCFTA. In fact, as stipulated in the treaty establishing the various economic communities, we need to open up and remove the various constraints that are there. In this logic, we should welcome the progress made in coordination illustrated by examples that is jointly carried out on the one hand between the African Union and the regional economic communities and the regional mechanisms, and between the RECs and the mechanisms themselves. The first example is on the agreement of cessation of hostilities in Ethiopia under the auspices of the African Union and IGAD, and which has inspired the two organizations in the recent adoption of the roadmap on the Sudan. Indeed, the second concerned the initiative of inter-community, regional economic community cooperation between ECAS and ECOWAS in maritime security. The third one concerns the efforts for resolving the issues and problems in the Great Lakes region. In fact, a quadripartite summit that was convened in Luanda on 27 June between the East African Community, the International Conference on the Great Lakes region, the ECAS and SADC. The fourth one relates to the contribution of AUDA and EPAD to strengthening the infrastructure, the fight against climate change and food security. The fourth one is embedded in the platform of exchange of information in real time between the RECs and the regional mechanisms, the Member States and the Commission of African Union, as prepared for within the framework of conflict prevention and management. In fact, to institutionalize this coordination and to give it a more formal division of labor between the African Union, the regional economic communities, the mechanisms, the Member States, indeed, is on your agenda and is being finalized. In fact, a retreat that was held last month between the PRC and the Commission was held in Kigali, and then we are waiting for the final report in order to enrich the final report that will be presented and then be considered by the regional economic community. In fact, the functional optimum functionality, the coordination should extend its field of action to include such as the financial institutions, the think tanks, the various research institutions, the UN Economic Commission for Africa, and the civil society and the private sector. In fact, the integration that we are talking about should and be built only by taking into account the geopolitical situations and the economic situations as they are happening in the world, because Africa is suffering the consequences of world governance and the effect of the financial crisis which is felt by Africa. In fact, Africa should come up with its own African common position dealing with trade, migration, development financing, and the conflict resolution. Talking of climate change, we have seen the consequences, and President William Ruto, in his capacity as the chairman of the the Committee of African Heads of State on climate change, in fact, has been fine-tuning the presentation and defending the interests of Africa. Peace and security in Africa and in the world, in fact, is a major source of concern for us. We have, in particular, strengthened the leadership that is for the Libyan issue under the leadership of President Sassou Nguesso of the Republic of the Congo, try to convene a national reconciliation conference in order to bring the Libyans together. And I want to recognize the presence of His Excellency Mohammed El-Menfi, who is here in our midst. The Sudanese crisis, which is a very serious thing, in fact, should mobilize our efforts. With IGAD and others, we need to mobilize humanitarian aid and bring the Sudanese themselves in an inclusive dialogue in order to come up with a civilian government that will be able to implement an emergency economic, humanitarian and security program, and as soon as possible. The meeting of the neighboring countries in Cairo, held 3 days ago, at the initiative of His Excellency President Al-Fattah al-Sisi, in which I participated, in fact has strengthened and enhanced the mobilization of Africa in solidarity. In fact, it is crucial, and we give special attention to the coherence and also the efforts that we are making together with the international community in order to ensure an orderly African leadership on this African problem, which is very sensitive. Obviously, the situation in the Sahel, particularly with the G5 countries, continue to be of concern. Several countries in this area, in this region, and the various attempts that have been made for a transition, in fact, to have democratic elections. The African Union and the appropriate regional organizations are trying to help these in order to restore constitutional order in accordance with the principles and the aspirations of the peoples concerned. In the Horn of Africa, in Somalia, despite the remarkable efforts by the leadership of President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, with the support of ATMIS, the situation still remains fragile. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the problem of development financing of Africa, in fact, is at the top of our agenda. I have the pleasure to appreciate the initiatives taken by the African Development Bank under the leadership of our brother, Dr. Desina, and the impetus he has given to financing of integration and regional integration. Indeed, we need to assert here that is Africa to assert its ambition of development on this issue. In fact, we need to ensure that there is a reform of the international financing institutions. In fact, through the progress that has been made with the opening of the G20 to the African Union, the reluctance of including a continent in political and international political and financial governance, we still have a long way to go. Such resistance will concretize our resolve to pursue our fight for more justice for our continent. I express the wish that our deliberations will make new and significant contributions to this decisive struggle, and I thank you for your kind attention.
The important role of the United Nations as the key contributor to an empowered and transformed Africa, in line with the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda of 2063, I now have the pleasure to invite Her Excellency Madame Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, to deliver her statement. Your Excellency.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Azali Assoumani, the President of the Union of Comoros and Chairperson of the African Union, Your Excellency, William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, our warmly welcoming host, Your Excellency, Musa Faki Mohammed, the Chairperson of the Commission of the African Union, and my brother, Excellencies, women and youth of Africa, distinguished delegates, Asante Sana. It is really a great honor to join you at the 5th mid-year coordination meeting of the African Union, the regional economic communities and the regional mechanisms. I would like to thank the Government of Kenya for the warm welcome home and the African Union for inviting me to share some reflections. This year's meeting provides us with yet again another unique opportunity to consolidate common ground in shaping and implementing Africa's narrative to meet the ambitions of Agenda 2063 and the aspirations of African people. Excellencies, today our world continues to face unprecedented crises, from the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19, a climate emergency, and the knock-on effects of the war in Ukraine. None of us need reminding that Africa played no part in creating any of these challenges. Unmet commitments by the international community to financing, to climate action and adequate humanitarian responses have further aggravated the obstacles to the efforts made by Africa and its leaders to implement Agenda 2063. Meanwhile, we see renewed conflict and extremist terrorism are wreaking havoc across the continent, resulting in lost decades of development and millions of displaced persons and refugees. These calamities are leaving a generation of our young people, especially women, with the anxiety of a tortured present and a deeply uncertain future. Let me salute you as African leaders. Against this challenging global and continental backdrop, you continue tirelessly, day after day, here and abroad, to make the powerful case for Africa. Africa as the new horizon of possibility and as the source of solutions for its own challenges and those of the planet. Excellencies, you have the United Nations' complete solidarity. In just one important demonstration of this support and solidarity, the Secretary-General continues to call the G20 for meaningful climate action that will end the addiction to fossil fuels so that we may address the imperative of a 1.5-degree world. He also continues to call loudly for the SDG stimulus, tackling debt distress and increasing fiscal space through the reallocation of additional SDRs to the African Development Bank initiative, and the reform of the current global financial architecture, which is today morally bankrupt. Excellencies, if African solutions to African challenges and opportunities are to be more than a slogan, we must have a strong voice in the G20, defining Africa's innovation and ideas, and we must also have unified action by African leaders to disrupt the unacceptable status quo. We applaud the strong voices of President Ruto, President Macky Sall, and President Ramaphosa at the recent summit of a new global financial pact in Paris. You're here today to discuss, among other very serious issues, the African Union's reforms, the second 10-year plan of Agenda 2063, governance issues, and the work of the regional economic communities and mechanisms. As you do so, you will need to ensure that your cohesive voice and common positions come together to shape the upcoming G20 meeting, the UN General Assembly, and the SDG Summit. It will also inform the Climate Action Summit, the commemoration of the UN Declaration of Human Rights at 75, and the World Bank IMF fall meetings on reform, and then the last of the meetings of the year, the Paris Climate Stocktaking at COP28. The United Nations remains committed to accompanying the continent with the framework of Agenda 2030 as it informs Agenda 23, but also as you navigate these international rough waters and through these milestone summits. Finally, Excellencies, allow me to end with a plea to all of you. As an African woman and a very proud Nigerian, mother of 6 and grandmother of 4, I have an intergenerational stake in Africa. The continent faces a moment of reckoning when the world appears to take its gaze off Africa. We may appear down, but we are far from out. And as our leaders, we continue to count on you to forge a path towards delivering the vision for Africa that is enshrined in the 2063 agenda. Excellencies, this will not happen unless we stand united, with no light between you. As we say in Africa, if the wall cracks, the lizard will enter. And it needs you to be determined to live up to the courage of our convictions with a sense of urgency. It is this unity that we must draw from on the depths of Africa's turbulent history, but also our shared values and a sense of common purpose. Ultimately, Excellencies, it is Africa's very dignity that is at stake for us and future generations. In the words of late Kwame Nkrumah, who inspired Agenda 2063, I quote, "We in Africa, who are pressing now for unity, are deeply conscious of the validity of our purpose. We need the strength of our combined numbers to protect ourselves from the very real dangers of colonization returning in disguised forms." Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, the women and youth of Africa, thank you for this opportunity, and I wish you constructive and productive meetings. Senator Simon.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Madam Deputy Secretary General. Excellencies, I now have the great honor to invite His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, to deliver his statement. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency Azali Osmani, President of the Union of Comoros and the Chair of Africa Union, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency Mr. Musa Faki Mohammed, the Chairman of the Africa Union Commission, Your Excellency Isufu Mahamadou, Champion of the SCFTA and former President of Niger, Your Excellency Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, heads of organs and institutions of the Africa Union, regional economic communities and regional mechanisms, honorable ministers, the Honorable Anwar Guru, Chairperson of Council of Governors, the Honorable Johnson Sakaja, the Governor of the City of Nairobi, honorable members of Parliament, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am greatly honored and delighted and I have a high privilege to have this opportunity to welcome you to the city of Nairobi and to Kenya. The opportunity to host this summit and your visit to our country does a tremendous honor to our nation. I welcome all of you, Your Excellencies, ministers, and our friends from across the continent and beyond to Kenya. Let me just give you one or two tips about Kenya. First, around the city of Nairobi, it is a city that has a canopy of very green on one side and also a national park in the city. In the national park, which is maybe 10, 15 minutes from your hotel room, we have wildlife, lions and all manner of wildlife. We have tried to fence, but sometimes, as you know, wild animals, they break away from the fence. So if you take time to walk around the city of Nairobi and you meet a lion, please be careful, because they are wild. We try to keep them inside. Secondly, let me also welcome you to Nairobi, to Kenya, and to give you some information that scientists, and I am one of them, have proven that the earliest remains of man are in Kenya. And therefore, for those of you who know the history of humankind, this is where humanity began. And so while you are here and you feel at home, it is because you truly are at home. So, and I want to give you my commitment that as the people of Kenya, we are having a national conversation as to whether we should have any visa for anybody coming home. So next time, next time you come to Nairobi, you might not need a visa. Excellencies, it is difficult to overstate the fundamental importance of this summit and the momentous consequence of the transformative business we have assembled here to transact. You will recall that as a continental political community, we resolved unanimously to pursue the integration agenda with greater vigor and focus. This commitment was underscored by the decision to formulate a suitable framework to effectively coordinate the diverse efforts undertaken through our 8 regional economic communities and various mechanisms that is part of the ecosystem of the AU. It is evident from the variety of activity, enhanced efficacy and viability of AU's agenda and the undeniable increase of the AU Commission's administrative capacity and overall vigor of the regional and Pan-African integration efforts that the AU's commitment was earnest, accompanied by demonstrable political will and a focused and effective implementation strategy. We are a busy continent that is going places. The young, clean, green continent of the future, and we are determined to lead our march into this future as a united, empowered contributor of sustainable solutions for global problems. We are reasoning together, generating effective solutions together, implementing them together, facing our challenges head-on together, making progress and getting results. This is what has brought Africa's implementation leadership to Nairobi, and the sum total of the agenda of the 5th Media Summit, which is this meeting. For this, I want to celebrate all of you who are here today, not just for making time to be here, but also for the work you do every day in taking the Pan-African Unity Project forward. For this is what the integration agenda is all about. Whether we are talking about regional economic communities or mechanisms or the broader continental effort, the unity of African people is our primary goal. I commend His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, for successfully chairing the Heads of State and Government's Orientation Committee, which has effectively steered AUDA-NEPAD in its momentous breakthrough in achieving the Agenda 2063 aspiration of consolidating regional and continental integration. I also thank President al-Sisi for successfully hosting the African COP, or the Implementation COP as it was called, the last conference of state parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. In November last year, it was at this COP that Africa firmly revealed to the world a new determination to project a clear, forceful, and united voice and claim its opportunity to contribute to resolving humanity's most serious existential threat, that is climate change. I salute with gratitude His Excellency President Ali Bongo Ondimba, President of the Republic of Gabon, in his capacity as the chair of the Economic Community of Central African States, for the progress he has made in stewarding collaboration among regional economic communities under the Inter-Reg Cooperation Initiative. As a result, the ECAS and the Economic Commission of Western Africa States has made significant strides in strengthening maritime security cooperation. I also appreciate the work being done by His Excellency President Ismail Omar Guelleh, the President of the Republic of Djibouti, who chairs the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, for his able leadership of IGAD's contribution to the progress towards agreement on the cessation of hostilities in Ethiopia, and now the activities that we are all undertaking to ensure that Sudan returns to normalcy and takes up its place as a stable, peaceful country in our continent. Further, I am cognizant of the animated activities and excellent work that has brought much progress in ongoing projects and initiatives being undertaken across many spheres by the economic community of West African states under the able leadership of His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Common Market of East Africa and Southern Africa led by His Excellency Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia, Southern Africa Development Community, SADC, chaired by His Excellency President Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Community of the Sahel, Saharan states under the stewardship of His Excellency President of Benin, Patrice Talon, the Arab Union of the Maghreb, led by His Excellency Tayyip Pakouche of Tunisia, and the East African Community under His Excellency President Evariste Ndayishimiye of Burundi. I must also recognize and praise the good and excellent work that the AU Commission continues to do under the leadership of its chair, His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat. This summit has been made possible by the able leadership of his team. These AU-REC success stories establish without any doubt that a lot of great work is being done all over our continent, and that in our time, African leadership is signaling urgency, focus, consistency, and determination to sustainably manage and solve prevailing challenges and develop robust instruments to anticipate and preempt future crises. With such commitment, we now have confidence to pursue sustainable development and shared prosperity, and expect that Agenda 2063 is now firmly on course. The most compelling signal that African integration is unstoppable and that it will open doors for unprecedented socio-economic transformation is the progress we have made in implementing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We must all be proud of this magnificent project, an historic achievement by and for ourselves, whose positive effects will reverberate throughout the world for a long time to come. I am not exaggerating. Let us consider the bare facts of the matter. This single mechanism has inaugurated the world's largest free trade area. Under it, 54 countries have agreed to create a single market with a population of 1.4 billion people and a GDP of US dollars 3.4 trillion. The free trade area is projected to lift 30 million people out of extreme poverty and boost incomes by 7%, or US dollars 450 billion by 2035. As I have had occasion to remark before elsewhere, this is the magnitude of what typical Pan-African collective action can achieve, and we are only getting started. The progress we have made by collaborating with unprecedented firmness of purpose in different domains, including peace and security, regional integration, investment, trade and development, and climate change, is of tremendous and positive transformative significance for us collectively. Agenda 2063 is our blueprint to deliver the Pan-African vision of an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa driven by its own citizens, representing a dynamic force in the international arena. Therefore, it is more critical now than ever before that we marshal our collective consciousness, willpower, solidarity and unity to fulfill our fundamental generational mandate of introducing Africa as a new global power, ready and able to provide leadership towards a new industrial age that shall simultaneously usher in an era of inclusive development, shared prosperity, and effective climate action. We must therefore capitalize on the institutional reform momentum at the African Union to pursue the complete development of effective capacity to deliver Pan-African transformation. To do this, self-reliance, ladies and gentlemen, is essential, and a fit-for-purpose institutional architecture is indispensable at the AU. At the moment, over 60% of our program's budget is financed by partners. The demands of our challenging time require an AU that can pursue multiple urgent and critical interventions using internally mobilized resources. The Pan-African movement has always been about sovereignty and agency. First and foremost, chronic dependence, even on well-meaning partners, is starkly inconsistent with the aspiration of independence, sovereignty, and agency. And I therefore believe that we must take seriously the recommendations that have been made towards making our organization an organization that stands on its feet and an organization that is funded by us. This is why we must make progress in exploring, developing, and implementing solutions like the Kigali Decision, AU Decision 605 of 2016. Similarly, you may want to know that that decision has now been implemented by 17 countries. We need to persuade all our other brothers and sisters in the other countries to come on board so that we can do the responsible thing and fund our own organization. Similarly, it is time to free up the African Union from structural and organizational constraints, including duplication and other inefficiencies, thereby facilitating it to be effective on a greater scale. As a starting point, defining the roles and functions of different organs and instruments more clearly is unavoidable. The coordination, administrative, and implementation mandate of the Commission, the legislative and oversight function of a strong Pan-African Parliament, and the political leadership, ownership, and broad policy direction of the Council all need to be reflected more clearly through rational structural delineation. I hope, it's my prayer, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, that we finally make the right decision and build an organization that is fit for purpose, that has the requisite finances, the needed voice, and the leadership that can project Africa's position much more clearly with a strong voice so that we can take our place in the community of nations. COP27 was a turning point of tremendous magnitude because it brought home to the peoples of Africa the imperative to reconfigure our model of engagement with global and multilateral frameworks in general, and the urgency of projecting a new place, role, and voice to define Africa's contribution to global development and climate action. As we reflect and deliberate upon President El-Sisi's account of his commendable use of COP27 to facilitate the emergence of a fresh Afrocentric perspective to climate change, it is vital that we resolve to do even better and go much further at the forthcoming COP28 by taking on board a more robust position and proposing a transformed and inclusive global approach to tackling the climate change crisis. This is why it is important for us to pay special attention to the Africa Climate Summit, the first ever in our continent under the AU, which will take place here in Nairobi between September 4th and 6th. The summit, coming after the Paris summit where greater clarity emerged, will be a critical opportunity for us to accelerate global energy transition and deliver African solutions to the COP28 in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates. When we return to Nairobi in September, therefore, our sole business will be to mobilize and converge around a common position and advocate for global alignment on a green growth agenda complemented by a transformative global climate finance compact. Your participation in this summit must therefore anticipate your stronger participation in the Africa Climate Summit. And ladies and gentlemen, as we come to that summit, there are two very important things that as a continent we must harmonize, consolidate, and package our collective position. We must have a collective position on matters to do with debt and liquidity. We must all agree that it is time for a new financing mechanism. The reform of the multilateral development banks is no longer about if, it is when that is going to happen, so that we can eliminate the current structure that is unfair to the majority of the people in Global South and especially in our African continent. None other than the UN Secretary General himself has said that our continent pay anywhere up to 8 times more than our brothers and sisters elsewhere do. It is only fair that we have a financing mechanism that treats everybody equally. All of us have read about the animal farm, where there are some that are more equal than others. Our position is that we don't live in the animal farm, that we treat each other, and all of us are treated by a financial system equally. And all we are asking, we are not asking for one financial system that favors us. No. We are asking for a financial system that is fair for everybody. Part of the challenges we have of liquidity, part of the challenges we have in debt distress is actually caused by an unfair financial architecture that makes us pay interest more than others. Today, we have a debt stock of $640 billion as Africans, paying close to $70 billion every year. If we had a fair financial architecture that treats everybody fairly and that does not profile Africa as risky, we would be paying less than half what we are paying today in debt repayments. So we are simply asking that we have a conversation, a candid conversation, on having a fairer financial system, and that is why the reform of the multilateral development banks is an urgent necessity. And secondly, that we were left behind in the fossil fuel energy industrial development. God, in his own wisdom, has put Africa at the center. We have climate change as an existential crisis to humanity. but also we have green energy, which we have renewable energy, which we have in plenty, as a development imperative to be able to go into the future. That puts us at the center of the solution of the crisis of climate change. And that is a conversation we want to come and have in Nairobi, because Africa, apart from having the greatest stock of renewable energy, we have other assets, minerals, that we have the largest reserves globally that can be used for green energy development. We have the largest reserves of uncultivated arable land that can drive, according to Adesina, my brother, we can increase grain in our globally by up to 100%, maybe even 200%. We have the youngest population, the youngest global workforce in our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, we have what it takes to provide a solution for both decarbonization, taking the world into green industrialization, and also ensuring that we decarbonize everywhere globally. So those are the two things that we must focus our attention and be able to position our continent appropriately. And that's why I said earlier, we need a fit-for-purpose organization, and we need to fund the organization ourselves. You all know it is said, he who pays the piper calls the tune. When you return to Nairobi, therefore, in September, our sole business will be to mobilize and converge our common position and advocate for global alignment, as I have said, that puts Africa at the center. I take this opportunity to once more appreciate the indispensable contribution made by the AU Commission and the leadership of its chair to all arrangements and the tremendous logistical undertaking required to prepare a successful summit. It is because of this partnership with the Commission that we have made progress in laying ground for an event that will give our continent a platform from which to launch its agenda into the global discourse. I am confident that the summit will be successful in achieving all its objectives. I wish all of us wonderful deliberations as we receive the various reports. Enjoy your time in Kenya, and God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. President, for your statement. And now it's my distinct honor and pleasure to invite His Excellency, Mr. Azali Othmani, President of the Union of Comoros and Chairperson of the African Union, to deliver his statement.
Monsieur William Ruto,
Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, my dear colleagues, heads of state and of government, Excellency Chairperson of the African Union, Musa Faki Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed, Excellencies Ministers, Excellencies, the Chief Executives of Regional Economic Mechanisms and Regional Economic Communities and Regional Mechanisms, Excellencies, Honorable, Assalamu alaikum. The halfway through the mandate entrusted to me on October 18th in Addis Ababa, we are gathered here today in this beautiful capital of Nairobi for the 5th Media annual coordination meeting of the African Union. I would like to first begin by expressing my sincere thanks to our brother, William Ruto, who I call my brother in my language, and his government, and as well as the peoples of Kenya, for the very warm welcome extended to us, and to express to him on your behalf and on my own our deep gratitude. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Bwana Raisi, Your Excellency. Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, at a time when the world is in the throes of technological change, Africa, our continent, is still prey to the scourges of division and bloody conflict. Conflicts that throw whole swaths of societies into destitution and desolation. In this context, therefore, I would like to express here our total solidarity with our sister countries, which are today going through these crisis situations, and at the same time renew our call to silencing the guns for a frank and sincere dialogue between the various protagonists. It is through the dialogue that we will succeed in transcending our differences and in removing the obstacles that stand in the way of our progress towards an Africa that's integrated, prosperous, and peaceful, that we all so earnestly desire. Since our February summit in Addis Ababa, and deeply convinced that peace and security are the driving force behind our development strategies and programs, indeed, I have, in consultation with President Musa Faki, my brother, initiated contacts with the main players in the Sudan crisis with a view to finding a peaceful way and to support all initiative in order to arrive at a peaceful solution. This fratricidal conflict has not only led to the loss of many lives, but has also driven thousands of people into exile. It is with the same concern also that I have dispatched an emissary to Mali and to Burkina Faso to inquire about the state of progress of the transition process in these sister countries. I dare to hope that the holding of the constitutional referendum in Mali will be a first step towards a transparent, inclusive, and peaceful elections. Also, I visited Guinea-Conakry, where I conveyed the African Union's message of peaceful transition, culminating in a rapid return to constitutional order through open, free, and fair elections. The quadripartite meeting held on June 27th in Angola on the crisis in the east of DRC under the aegis of the African Union, and in which I took part, is part of this desire to contribute to resolving this conflict, which has already lasted more than 2 decades and is destabilizing the region and indeed the whole of Africa. We also undertook a peace mission to Kyiv and St. Petersburg, a report of which will be presented to you later today. In this globalized world, no country, however large or powerful, can claim to be immune to war or its consequences. And ladies and gentlemen, on the multilateral front, following the footsteps of my predecessor, my brother, President Macky Sall, I continued our advocacy at the G7 summit in Hiroshima, calling for Africa's place on the United Nations Security Council as a permanent member, as well as our membership of the G20. Nor did I fail to raise the question of debt and energy, 2 major issues that seriously handicap the development of our continent. throughout this journey. I have also been able to count on the invaluable collaboration of the chairman of the African Union Commission, our brother Musa Faki Mahamat, and his teams, as well as on the support of the members of the conference bureau. I'd like to DRC. I'd like to extend my great thanks to the DRC. I'd like to express my sincere thanks to them all. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the acceleration of the Continental Africa Free Trade CFTA, our significant progress over the past 6 months have confirmed once again and our conviction that this continental common market is a great opportunity to achieve the Pan-African vision of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa. Currently, the achievements include, among others, the establishment of an adjustment fund through Afrexim Bank, already capitalized at $1 billion for the benefit of AFCFTA. The member states, the establishment of a guided trade initiative in October 2022, which has enabled the FCFTA to adhere to this initiative. The operationalization of peace and the settling of payments which facilitate intra-Africa payments in African currency will then reduce the cost of currency transfers. As you can see, these are concrete actions that provide real grounds for hope, which is why I invite those member states that have not yet ratified and deposited their instruments ratification to do so as soon as possible. The achievement of our objectives are set out in Agenda 2063. This depends on that. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, from June 12th to 14th, a ministerial conference on blue economy and climate action in Africa was held in the Union of Comoros, attended by several ministers and the following institutions: the African Union Commission, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the European Union, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, UNDP, and the Indian Ocean Commission. The conference was in accordance with the theme of the year, namely the acceleration of the FCFTA. In fact, intra-Africa trade is mainly carried out by road and sea. And therefore, it has now been established that the implementation of the AFCFTA could double the sea freight from 58 to 131.5 million tons. As a result, the development of the sea transport, this appears as one of the key factors for the success of Africa's economic integration. Africa's island states, despite their structural fragility, are brimming with opportunities and potential, given the vastness of their maritime space, which is why the Moroni Declaration, the outcome of this ministerial conference, through the relevance of its recommendation, should constitute our roadmap in this area. With regard to the institutional reform decided upon in 2016 by the Assembly of Heads of State and Government to breathe new life into the African Union, we welcome the remarkable work carried out by the team of experts led by Professor Pierre Mukoko Mbonjo, who will share the main conclusions with us during this summit. The present media coordination meeting, for example, and the reduction in the number of commissioners are among the concrete results of this reform. Its aim is to enable us to evaluate, rationalize, and plan our various projects and programs in order to achieve genuine African integration. As regards the theme chosen for 2024, in this case education, I'd like to salute the pertinence and relevance of the choice made by our organization. As Nelson Mandela once said, education is the most powerful weapon for changing the world. And the numbers for education, figures for education in Africa are alarming. It has been established that Africa will need 17 million additional teachers to achieve universal primary and secondary education by 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, it is unacceptable that in this age of new information technologies and artificial intelligence, there are still entire regions of Africa without access to basic education. The challenge is enormous, but I'm counting on your collective intelligence to achieve concrete results and to reserve the current trends. In this ever increasingly turbulent world, we need to close ranks more than ever and to be able to face up to the challenges that are growing with each passing day. It's only together and driven by what we must henceforth be, which is our motto, African solutions to African problems, that we will achieve an Africa that is reconciled with itself, prosperous and open to the world. Strongly motivated by these principles, I remain confident that Africa and our Pan-African organization will be able to meet the challenges of our upcoming agendas, notably the Russia-Africa Summit, the Nairobi Summit on Climate Change, the G20 in India, and the COP28 in the United Arab Emirates. It's on this hopeful note that I declare open the 5th Media Coordination Meeting of our organization. I thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I wish now to invite all Excellencies, heads of states, heads of delegations, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, the United Nations Deputy Secretary General, the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, the heads of regional economic communities and regional mechanisms for the official group family photo of this meeting. The official photo will be taken at the stairs as we exit